Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so Velocity 2X on the PlayStation 4, aka almost certainly 2014's least disappointing video game. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. The sequel to the rather magnificent Velocity Ultra, which came out first on Vita, then appeared on PS3, I believe last year. This is a kind of hybrid between a 2D shoot 'em up and a sort of side scroller, the type that you might have played in the 16-bit days. But in truth, it's really not like anything you've ever played before, especially if you've never played Velocity Ultra or the original Velocity, which is basically the same game but was a PS Mini. How best to describe this? Okay, the 2D shoot 'em up parts are, they look like any game you might have seen before from Cave or anybody else, where you scroll up the screen in a little ship. But the hook here, as it was with Velocity Ultra, is that you can teleport with a quick press of the square button on PS4 or any PlayStation. You can basically teleport your ship to another part of the map instantly, and the whole game is structured around being able to do this. So it might be the case where you're teleporting in between different parts of a level where you wouldn't be able to get there otherwise, or you're teleporting long distance to get other things, or you're teleporting out of the way of enemies. This, much like Velocity Ultra, is a brilliant gameplay system, and the design around it is magnificent. But the main thing that the team Future Lab, which is a Brighton-based developer in the UK, have done for the sequel is to include an entire different genre and blend them together, which is amazing. So you will quite often in levels fly your little ship into a hatch, and then you'll be in a interior location playing a side scroller. You play as Lieutenant Kai Tana, who is basically just a badass chick who's there to run through these levels, killing enemies. But again, it's not really like anything you'd have played before, especially this part of it, because you can also teleport as Kai Tana, and the levels are sort of a nice blend of platforming, right stick shooting, but mainly structured much like the stuff outside in the ship around this teleportation system. So you're quickly teleporting through walled areas, jumping and teleporting through like a ceiling. There are enemies that you can only attack from behind, so they run at you and you teleport behind them and shoot them in the back. All of this stuff, this game is called Velocity, like the original game. All of this stuff is done at a ludicrous speed. I mean, everything. The game rewards you handsomely for finishing the levels very, very quickly, and also you have to collect crystals in the side-scrolling bits and what are called survivors, but actually like blue pods in the 2D shoot-'em-up bits. But the game is all based around this idea of doing things as quickly as possible. The controls are instantaneous and incredibly responsive, and the fact that you're doing some very, very complicated maneuvers as you get towards the back end of the game, jumping, teleporting, throwing these teleportation devices, teleporting to there and then teleporting out of there without falling down. It really does start to get quite complicated towards the back end of the game. There's 50 levels, by the way, as there were in the original, and it does take a good chunk of time to get through. But it's all I can say, much like when I played the first Velocity, every couple of levels or so, I just kept saying to myself, genius, and then another idea would come, and genius. This game starts where that game left off, and then just the fact that they've improved on what I use this term rarely, but the original Velocity Ultra, I'd say, is basically a perfect video game. There's nothing wrong with it. It's amazing. They've managed to do that again, make the stuff about Velocity Ultra even better, and certainly looks absolutely gorgeous on PS4. But they've included an entire extra genre in there and done that in a way that nobody's ever done it before, and done that amazingly as well. I don't even know. You've called it the least disappointing game of 2014. I couldn't possibly disagree with that. It's a masterful piece of design, and really a strong candidate for the importance of design, because there's a lot of the popular, especially in indie space, a lot of the popular games at the moment kind of they're done through random generation. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like Spelunky or Rogue Legacy, but there is something to be said for design that can be laid out on paper, and every single pixel is put in the exact right place to fine-tune a gameplay experience, and that's what Future Lab have done here. I cannot fault this game. It's an incredible experience. I finished it last night. Apart from one tiny bug, which was just a non-issue, and No, that's the only thing that I could ever possibly say that was wrong with the game, and that's a non-issue anyway. An amazing piece of work. What do you think?
Aside from, I'm surprised you mentioned that it gets quite taxing later on. It does get taxing, but I think aside from a couple of sort of brief, infrequent bits which involve teleporting mid-jump, I think that this is a game that almost anyone could complete.
Yeah,
I mean, anyone who's au fait with the DualShock. I mean, anyone who could sort of, not just Joe Schmo in the street here play this. So, so anyone who would class themselves as someone who plays video games. So the genius of it for me is that the whole of it can be seen by anyone. I've recommended so many games over the last few years where friends have come back to me afterwards and said that game you recommended me was rubbish, and I've had to ask, did you play it on hard? Because that's where the real game is. There's no barrier like that here. You're spared none of the just non-stop cleverness or excitement if you aren't trying to perfect every level. For example, it's a game that just wants players to experience it. Dying's not punished really at all. There are time limits scattered here and there, but they're like 20 minutes. I think half an hour was one of them.
They're there for people who might be really struggling, but they're basically consistent.
Exactly, yeah. There is a fearsomely challenging side to it if you want it, and it's only there if you want it. You will not think any less of this game if you aren't intending to go after every platinum trophy. It's stunning if you're a casual player, and stunning if you consider yourself to be hardcore and you're going to try and do everything and get everything perfect and whatnot. And there is something perfect about that structure. I can't imagine anyone walking away disappointed. I think it's a perfect way to make a video game because there's no barrier. Everyone can enjoy it. Everyone can see what's brilliant about it. And like you said, it's truly a cross-genre. It's kind of a racing game, it's kind of a shooter, and it's kind of a puzzle game. But it somehow has hardly any of the annoying traits that you associate with those genres. Yeah. So, for example, the shooting sections are really thrilling, despite the fact that you can't die, really. And the puzzling sections, you're told when to place a teleporter.
Yeah.
And you don't feel any less gratified when you use it correctly. It really is a masterpiece of design. And if I have one issue, and actually I have two, they're utterly minor, but there is a little bit of grinding involved once you hit level 40.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the penalty is having to go back and play more Velocity 2X, so who the hell cares? Yeah. But, we've spoken about that structure before. It's a little bit irritating. However, it's thoroughly mild here. You can go back and blast through the first few levels really fast and get the time medals, and that should sort you out. Secondly, the bosses are so outrageously good in this. The boss levels are not just amongst the best boss battles I've ever had. They're just a few of the best levels I've ever played in a game, I think, really, honestly. So I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't like a massive supernova final boss battle at the end. But again, you got the sense that this was another small ploy to make it that little bit more accessible for everybody. And they give you something in exchange. They give you a few levels out of nowhere. They explore a few brand new gameplay systems. I won't spoil that side of it because it's a really nice surprise. So again, fair deal. I'll take that as compensation for there not being an amazing boss battle. I mean, if you put Last of Us Remastered aside, which I'm sure some people would have in contention, I'd put it to one side because it's a PS3 port. But regardless, there is no doubt in my mind that Velocity 2X is by far the best exclusive on the PlayStation 4.
100% agree. 100% agree. And it won't be bettered this year, without doubt. And I very much doubt it will be bettered next year, to be honest. Games don't really come along very often that are this perfect. Flawless is the word that I'm going to use because I've used it since the first game. But Nintendo make games that feel complete in a way that most games can never feel, and this doesn't feel anything like a Nintendo game. It's stylish, and the music is kind of a combination of. Sometimes it sounds a bit like what they call Apollo 440 from the 90s. Sometimes it's like a bit dubsteppy. Sometimes it's techno. All really good. Half of it's done by the guy in charge of Future Lab, James Marsden, and half of it's done by the guy who does the music for Killzone. I think I don't know if it's actually half and half, but they both do it together, and it's a really good soundtrack. But in terms of design and just a level of brilliance that is really rare, you can't go wrong. And what a treat for people to be able to get this effectively for free on PlayStation Plus. You said, I think, in a tweet not long ago that I'm going to paraphrase you, something along the lines of how nice it is that you won't have to convince friends to shell out for this masterpiece, because it's difficult to sell people on a game that they might never heard of. And if you watch footage of this game, it looks like a lot of games that it's not, if that makes sense. It looks like you've played a million shooters and a million side scrollers, especially in the indie game space in the last few years. Trust us, this doesn't play like any of them. It really, really doesn't. It's something completely unique, completely of itself, and at times genuinely mind-blowing. As challenging as you want to make it, as you said, but also as accessible. It doesn't even make sense. Just go and download it immediately, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed. I promise.